Hey there, Wide Awake Horror family. Thanks for tuning in. If you're part of the family, then you're a legend. However, over 90% of you aren't subscribed. So please take this time to smash that sub button and hit that like button to lock it in. We really appreciate each and every one of you guys. One last thing. Leave a comment on where you're listening from. I would really love to interact with my fellow supporters. Comment down a hello too, and we will respond. Your support helps these stories reach new viewers and grows our family even more. I met Jason on a Wednesday, which already felt a bit weird because I usually don't swipe right on a weekday. Something about his bio stood out though. It was super average. Just boring enough to seem safe, you know. Said he worked in real estate, had a dog named Toby, divorced last year, no kids, open to something real. And I was like, all right, fine. Let's see. He wasn't super hot or anything, but he had this kind of dad vibe that I didn't hate. Like, not an actual dad, but the kind of guy who buys fresh fruit and knows where to get the good sourdough. That kind of vibe. We talked a bit on the app and then moved to text, and I liked how low pressure he was. No wide texts, no weird emojis, just actual sentences. I felt normal with him, and that's more rare than you'd think. Anyway, we met at this place called Harvard Cafe, halfway between both our places. When I got there, he was already sitting outside with an iced tea, wearing one of those zip-up sweaters that make guys look like they run charity 5Ks. He stood up to hug me, and I remember thinking his cologne smelled like a hotel lobby in a good way. The date was decent. Nothing too deep, but he asked questions, listened to my answered, and didn't interrupt me once. And yeah, he talked a bit about his messy divorce, but nothing dramatic. Just said they grew apart. She was nice but distant. Something about COVID making things worse. The usual. I wasn't digging for details. We hung out 2 more times after that. Coffee, then a walk. Then a dinner where we actually laughed and got into some heavier stuff. Family, weird childhood stuff. Future stuff. He said he wasn't in a rush, but liked the idea of building something slowly. I was into it. I'd been on too many dates where guys either wanted to hook up or trauma dump in the first 5 minutes. Jason felt in between, which felt safe. Okay, so this is where things start sliding. One afternoon, I ran into this girl named Mia, who I sort of knew from high school. We'd been in the same friend group for like a year, then drifted. She worked at a vet near where Jason lived, and she saw us together once when we were walking near his place. She didn't say anything then, but at the coffee shop she pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, is that guy's name Jason? Does he drive a black Subaru and have a bulldog?" My stomach did this weird dip. I said yeah, and her face kind of tightened. Then she told me something I honestly didn't know how to respond to. She said he wasn't divorced. He wasn't even separated. He still lived with his wife, his actual legal wife. And she knew this because the wife had brought their dog into her clinic like a week before, and she'd mentioned her husband was finally seeing a therapist to work on their marriage. It didn't click at first. I just stood there holding my iced coffee like I was frozen. And then Mia said it again, slower. His therapist. He told her I was his therapist. I literally laughed out loud at first because who does that? Who lies that deep? But then I started remembering stuff. Like how we only ever hung out during certain hours. How he always picked the spots. How we never went near where he said he lived. And he never invited me over. At first I thought it was just normal early dating boundaries. Now it felt like, I don't know, a scam, a trap, a test. I didn't text him for 2 days. I just stalked the wife's socials, which were all private except for her Pinterest. It had a wedding board still up, which made me want to scream into a pillow. Eventually, I caved and messaged him something basic. "Hey, want to grab lunch this week?" He said sure, still so casual, like nothing was wrong. We met at this sandwich place near the marina, and I swear I watched him talk like he was doing an impression of someone else, like he was reading off a script. I didn't even bring it up right away. I wanted to see if he'd slip or lie more or say something dumb. He didn't. He just kept asking about my week like we were a couple. So I said it just flat out. "Does your wife know I'm your therapist?" He blinked. That was it. Wouldn't blink. No face twitch, no gasp, no apology. Then he said, and I will never forget this, it helped her trust me again. I just stared at him. Like, did he think I was going to be flattered? He said it like it was some twisted genius solution. He explained that things were tense between them, and that he needed a neutral excuse to leave the house, but he didn't want to go to the bar or hang with guys. He thought saying he was seeing a therapist made him look like he was trying, and technically, I listened and talked about his problems, so it wasn't a total lie. He really tried to rationalize it, said he wasn't trying to hurt anyone, said he liked me, said he wanted to tell me, but the timing was never right. I left before finishing my sandwich. I didn't scream or cry or throw a drink on him. I just left. Blocked his number unmatched on the app, told Mia thanks for the heads up, and went home. I didn't even talk to my friends about it for a week. I was too embarrassed, I think. Not because I fell for it, but because I thought I was too smart to end up in someone's fake therapy plot. Now, sometimes I wonder if his wife ever found out. If she figured out I wasn't a therapist, just a regular girl with a bunch of tote bags and a broken coffee grinder. I almost hope she did, because the whole thing felt like a bad sitcom episode written by someone who's never met an actual woman. Anyway, that was Jason. There's this weird little moment right before a first date when you're walking toward the person and you haven't locked eyes yet. It's like this half second where anything could happen. Maybe they'll turn out hotter than their pictures. Maybe they'll already be holding your favorite drink. Or maybe, and this happened to me, they'll be sitting at a table with two kids in a booster seat and casually wave like it's no big deal. I met Emily on a Sunday afternoon, which was already pushing it for me because Sundays are sacred. That's the day I clean my apartment, reset my brain, maybe get some takeout and pretend to meal prep. But she was cute, like genuinely. Her pictures were a little over-filtered, sure, but she had this smile that looked real and not the usual forced kind people do with their heads tilted. And she messaged first, which I appreciated. Said something funny about my dog looking smarter than most people, which is true. We talked for about a week before setting something up. Nothing intense. She mentioned she was a busy girl and had a hectic work schedule. I didn't think much of it. Everyone's busy. She picked the spot. One of those trendy salad places that also sells weird juices that look like melted crayons. I wasn't thrilled, but I also wasn't about to suggest a burger joint and get judged for not eating kale. I showed up 10 minutes early because I'm worried about time, and I saw her already sitting at a table out on the patio. But here's the thing, she wasn't alone. She had two kids with her, a boy and a girl, maybe 6 and 8. I almost kept walking. Not because I hate kids or anything, but because it was so unexpected I literally thought she might be babysitting. Or maybe her sister dropped them off last minute. That would have made sense. But when I walked up and she smiled and waved like nothing was off, I knew immediately. These weren't someone else's kids. These were her kids. She stood up. He gave me a half hug and said, "So sorry, my sitter totally bailed last second, but I didn't want to cancel." Then she introduced the kids like it was a casual bonus feature. No heads up beforehand, no warning in the chat, not even a hint that she was a mom. Her bio said nothing about it. Not even a mom of 2 line with a heart emoji. And I get that people don't always want to lead with stuff like that, but dropping 2 full humans into a first date feels like a big thing to skip. I sat down because what else was I supposed to do? Just leave in front of the kids. I ordered a drink and tried to play it cool. The kids were actually fine, polite, chill, maybe a little too into the iPad, but they were kids. Not the best background noise when you're trying to figure out if the person across from you is into hiking or just says that because they took one photo on a trail once. Emily was distracted. I tried asking her about work, and halfway through her answer she had to deal with her daughter spilling juice. Then she disappeared into the bathroom with both of them for like 10 minutes. I just sat there with her purse at the table, looking like a clueless stepdad on a lunch break. When she came back, she apologized again and promised they'd be calm now. I just nodded. I wanted to leave, but I didn't know how. I felt awkward. I didn't want to be the guy who walks out on a woman with kids, even though I hadn't agreed to any of it. I figured I'd tough it out for like 30 more minutes and then make an excuse. The food came. Her son refused to eat because he wanted something else. She tried bargaining with him while also asking me what my 5-year plan was. Her daughter started showing me a Roblox character she built, and I just smiled and said it looked cool, even though I had no clue what I was looking at. Emily laughed and said, "You're really good with kids," like I was auditioning or something. At some point, she left again. Said she forgot something in the car and needed to grab it. She took her keys and left the kids at the table with me. And sitting there like, is this normal? and I now a free babysitter. Did she plan this? 15 minutes go by, then 20. I tried texting her. No answer. Her son was watching YouTube videos with the volume all the way up. Her daughter kept asking me if I knew how to make slime. I just kept checking the door. After a full 40 minutes, she came back like nothing happened. Said there was a line at the pharmacy nearby. Never apologized. Just sat back down and started talking about how she wanted to get serious with someone who understands the reality of real life. I didn't even respond. I was too confused, too annoyed. She had ditched me midday to run errands while leaving me with two kids I'd just met. I didn't even know their last names. When the bill came, she didn't offer to split it. Just said, "Thank you, that was really sweet of you," and started packing up the kids' stuff. I paid just to end it. I walked her and the kids to her car like I was in some weird dream, and she gave me a quick hug and said, "We should do this again sometime, maybe just the two of us next time." I didn't say anything. I just smiled, got in my car, and drove home in total silence. I didn't even turn on music. Just sat there with the AC on full blast, thinking about what had just happened. She texted the next morning. Just a simple, "had a great time yesterday." I didn't respond. A couple days later, she messaged again asking when I was free next. I blocked her. I still think about that day sometimes, not in a dramatic way, just to know what the hell even was that kind of way. Like, how did she think that was okay? Was that her plan all along? To see if I'd step up? Or was it just pure chaos and I was the lucky guy who got caught in it? Either way, lesson learned. Now when someone's bio says spontaneous, I ask how spontaneous. Because apparently that can mean we'll drop our kids on you with no warning and vanish for 40 minutes to pick up toothpaste. You ever match with someone on a dating app and think, okay, this person is probably too good to be true? That was my first thought when I matched with Brian. He was tall, ridiculously good looking, and his profile was annoyingly perfect. He had the whole "I'm well-traveled" thing going on, complete with photos of him in places like Bali, Prague, and New York. Classic, right? But then there was something about him that kept me swiping right. Maybe it was his adventurous spirit, or the fact that he seemed to genuinely enjoy deep conversations. His bio said something like, "looking for a genuine connection, someone to share life's big and small moments with." You can't help but think that sounds pretty nice, right? We hit it off almost immediately after matching. His messages weren't generic either, which is usually a red flag for me. You know, the usual "hey" or "what's up" nonsense. Yeah, none of that from Brian. He actually asked me about things I'd mentioned in my profile and sent thoughtful responses. It was clear he wasn't just texting me because he had nothing else to do. We were on the same wavelength, joking about silly things and sharing random thoughts. The texts flowed naturally, and after a few days, we decided to meet up for dinner. I'll admit I was excited. I'm not usually one to put too much pressure on a first date, but there was something about him that made me feel like maybe this could be it. You know, the person. When we met in person, he was exactly as I'd imagined, tall, perfectly groomed, and confident in that easygoing way that some people have, like they're too cool to be nervous. He greeted me with a warm handshake, and it felt like we were already friends, which is exactly what I wanted. But as we talked, something started to feel off, though I couldn't quite place it at first. The conversation was flowing, but it was also strangely rehearsed. I mean, I don't think he was reading from a script, but everything he said felt like he had said it before, like he knew exactly what to say to make me feel comfortable. He was charming, but it almost felt like he was trying too hard to be perfect. It wasn't anything huge, but little things like the way he talked about his passion for life and how he was always looking for someone with deep values made me feel like I was being played. Maybe it was just my gut, but I kept thinking there was something else going on. At some point during dinner, he started talking about his last relationship and how it had taught him a lot. Standard breakup talk, I guess. But then he mentioned her name, Rachel. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. It wasn't like I'd ever met anyone named Rachel who was important to me, so I let slide. He kept going on about how they had a deep connection, but it ended because life just wasn't aligned anymore. But then he casually mentioned that they had dated about 3 years ago. That's when my heart skipped a beat. 3 years ago, I couldn't help it, I had to ask. So, wait, what was her last name? I said it as casually as I could, not really expecting anything major, but still needing to know more. When he told me her full name, it hit me like a ton of bricks. That was my sister. My mind started to race, but I tried to keep my face neutral. I didn't want to seem like I was panicking, but everything felt so surreal in that moment. How had I not put it together sooner? How was this guy sitting across from me, acting like he didn't know I had a sister with the same name? But I had to play it cool. I didn't want to make a scene, and I sure as hell wasn't about to blow my cover by freaking out. So I kept asking questions, trying to get more information. I wanted to know what kind of person Rachel was to him. Was she still in his life? Had they kept in touch? Did he still care about her? But Brian was being strangely vague, giving me generic answers like, oh, we're still friends. And it's all in the past now. He said it with his calm, casual tone, but my gut was telling me something was wrong. That's when he dropped the bombshell. He said, I haven't really talked to her in a while, but I did try to reach out to her recently, just to see how she's doing. I don't know what it was about that moment, but my entire body went cold. Rachel hadn't mentioned anything about him reaching out, and if she had, I'm pretty sure she would have told me. I had to know for sure, so I texted her under the table without him seeing. The message was short and to the point. Do you know a guy named Brian? He says you guys dated. I didn't expect her to reply right away, but she did. Her message was just as short, but it hit me hard. Wait, you're on a date with Brian. He's been texting me nonstop, trying to get back together. What the hell? I couldn't breathe. I felt I was in some kind of twisted nightmare. Here I was sitting across from a guy who had been in a serious relationship with my sister. And not only was he acting like nothing was wrong, he was also still trying to get back with her. He had been texting her while on a date with me, and I had no idea. I could feel the anger starting to rise, but I didn't want to make a scene. Instead, I put my phone down, looked at Brian, and just said, I'm sorry, but this isn't going to work. I didn't yell, I didn't scream. I just told him it wasn't a good fit. He looked confused, but honestly, I didn't care. I paid the bill, and as I was walking out of the restaurant, I felt a sense of relief. He texted me later that night, saying it was great meeting me and that we should do it again sometime. I didn't even bother to respond. I blocked him. It wasn't until later that I realized just how messed up the whole situation was. He had treated me like some kind of regown, someone to flirt with while he tried to get back with my sister. He hadn't been interested in me at all. I was just an easy way to pass the time while he tried to win back someone else. To this day, I still can't figure out why Brian thought he could get away with it. He was so smooth, so charming, and yet I was just another pawn in his game. That date wasn't just awkward, it was downright deceptive. And I'm still pissed off about it. I wasn't expecting much when I matched with Lisa. In fact, I wasn't even planning on meeting up with her at first. You know how it is on dating apps. People seem interesting enough in the beginning, but most of the time it doesn't go anywhere. But Lisa was different. She didn't just send one-word messages or try to rush into things. Instead, her first message was thoughtful. She asked about my day, then followed up with a question about something I had mentioned in my profile. Something about my love for hiking. I thought, okay, she actually took the time to read my profile and remember details, which was already a step above most people I'd talked to. So I figured why not give it a shot. Her pictures were cute, nothing too fancy. Just a few shots of her smiling, a couple of her with friends, and one with a dog. That was enough for me. She seemed like a laid-back, easygoing person. I didn't expect any red flags, not from someone who liked the outdoors, and who wasn't trying to sell herself as something she wasn't. We started texting, and I found myself enjoying the conversation more than I expected. Lisa had this energy that was really easy to vibe with, and she was genuinely funny. Not like trying to be funny, but that kind of natural humor where you could tell she didn't take herself too seriously. She also wasn't pushy. There were no weird late-night texts or overly flirty messages. We'd just talk about our days, life in general, and random stuff. It felt easy. After a week of texting, I suggested we meet up. She was into the idea, and we picked a casual place for a drink. I'll admit I was nervous. I don't always feel like I'm great on first dates, and even though we'd been chatting for a while, there was always that underlying feeling that maybe it wouldn't work in person. You just never know. When I walked into the bar, I immediately saw her sitting at a table by the window. She was as cute in person as she was in her photos, casual yet put together. She waved when she saw me and I walked over, smiling. We exchanged the usual pleasantries and within a few minutes I felt at ease. The conversation started flowing like it had been before, only this time it felt even more natural. We laughed about silly things, shared a couple of stories, and both agreed that we'd both been on some pretty awkward dates in the past. The thing that stood out the most, though, was how attentive she was. Every time I said something, she was really engaged. She wasn't just nodding along, she actually cared about what I had to say. She asked me questions about my work, my family, even my hobbies. She even shared a couple of things about herself, but always in a way that felt genuine and not like she was trying to make herself sound perfect. But after a while, I started noticing something off. It wasn't anything huge, just little things here and there. First, she started asking me really specific questions about my past relationships. Like she wanted to know exactly how long they'd lasted, why they ended, and what I'd learned from them. I didn't think much of it at first, because I guess that's a pretty normal first date question. But the way she asked was different. It wasn't casual curiosity. It was almost like she was analyzing me, trying to figure out if I was damaged or not. Then came the second thing that really stood out. Out of nowhere, she started talking about her ex. And I mean, really talking about him. Like, way more than anyone should on a first date. She mentioned how he changed her and how she had sacrificed so much in their relationship. At first, I thought, okay, maybe she's just venting. We all do that sometimes. But then she started getting a little too detailed. She talked about how he had made her feel insecure and how she had to constantly fight for his attention. It didn't sound like something that happened years ago. It felt like she was still processing the whole thing. At first, I was just trying to be polite and listen, but after a while, I started to feel like I was being dumped on. It was like she couldn't stop talking about him, and it was starting to make me uncomfortable. But then it took an even weirder turn. She suddenly leaned in a bit closer and said, I've been on a lot of dates, but I haven't felt this way in a while. I feel like we really connect. It wasn't the words that freaked me out, it was how intense she sounded, like she had just met me, and here she was acting like we were already in some kind of deep relationship. It didn't feel like a compliment anymore. It felt like she was rushing things, trying to make me feel like we had something more than just a casual drink. I tried to steer the conversation away from relationships and asked her more about her job or what she liked to do for fun, but she kept bringing it back to her ex. She talked about how they used to go hiking all the time and how he had a similar love for nature as me. She even asked if I thought it was weird that she was still thinking about it. I didn't know how to respond. She kept asking these questions like she wanted me to reassure her that it was okay, that it was normal to still be so caught up in a past relationship. But it wasn't normal, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I'd met a lot of people who had gone through breakups and moved on, but Lisa seemed like she was still in the thick of it, even though she was sitting across from me, acting like everything was fine. It felt like she was using me as a distraction, a way to fill the empty space left by someone else. I decided to call it a night. I didn't want to say anything rude, but I was starting to feel suffocated by the whole thing. We said our goodbyes, and I left the bar feeling more confused than I had when I arrived. Lisa was nice, but there was this underlying tension that just didn't sit right with me. The next day, she texted me saying how great it was to meet up and that we should do it again sometime. But I didn't feel the same way. It wasn't that I didn't like her. It was just that I didn't want to get tangled up in whatever emotional mess she was still carrying around from her ex. I didn't reply to her text, and I'm not sure what it would have taken to fix that date, but I knew I couldn't go down that road. Sometimes people aren't ready for a new relationship, and sometimes they bring too much baggage along the way. Lisa was clearly still working through things, and I wasn't about to be the guy who helped her process her ex's leftovers. I didn't expect much from online dating. I mean, who does? It's always a mix of weird encounters, awkward conversations, and the occasional decent date. But then I matched with Matt. His profile wasn't anything extraordinary, but he seemed grounded, no weird phrases, no overly edited pictures. Just a straightforward guy, or so I thought. We talked for a couple of days before deciding to meet up for drinks at a local bar. When I first saw him in person, he looked just like his photos, tall, with a casual vibe. He was a little reserved at first, which I appreciated. I'm not into people who are overly energetic or too loud. Matt had this calm energy about him that I found refreshing. We grabbed a couple of beers and settled into a corner booth. The conversation started off easy, a lot of small talk about work, hobbies, and of course, our past relationships. Nothing out of the ordinary. We talked about our jobs for a bit. I didn't expect much from Matt's line of work, but when he mentioned that he was in finance, I figured it was just another corporate guy. Not that it was a red flag, but it didn't sound like the most exciting job. But then he said something that caught me off guard. He wasn't just in finance. He was working at a small boutique firm that specialized in debt collection. At first, I didn't think too much about it. I figured it was just a boring detail about his career, and maybe I'd get the full picture later. But as the conversation continued, Matt started to drop a few things that made me feel uneasy. He kept talking about numbers like they were the most important thing in the world. I tried to stay engaged, but I noticed that every time he mentioned his work, he became more animated. It was almost as if debt collection wasn't just a job for him, but a passion. Eventually, Matt made a comment that sent a chill down my spine. I've been in the business for a while now. I do background checks for the firm. It's kind of my job to figure out what makes people tick and see if they're worth the investment. He paused, noticing my raised eyebrows. I know it sounds a bit invasive, but it's just the way things are. You'd be surprised how much you can find out about someone just by looking at their credit score. I laughed, thinking he was joking. I mean, who talks about credit scores on a date? You're kidding, right? I don't think I've ever been asked about my credit score on a first date. He didn't laugh. Instead, he leaned forward, eyes wide with what seemed like genuine interest. I'm serious. I've seen people's whole financial lives laid out in front of me just by running a quick check. It's part of the job. You'd be surprised how much you can learn. The moment he said that, a pit formed in my stomach. This wasn't the kind of job someone should casually bring up on a date. Debt collection. Fine. But the way he was talking about it, like it was a game, something he took pride in, it felt wrong. I started thinking about all the things I hadn't told him. My credit score, for one. How would he feel about that? What if he'd already looked it up? Trying to keep the conversation light, I asked him, do you, run people's credit scores for fun or something? Matt shook his head. Nah, it's just part of the job. I've been doing it for so long that I can pretty much guess what people's financial situation is like. You'd be surprised at how much I can find out just by asking a few questions. That's when I realized what was happening. He wasn't just telling me about his job. He was bragging. He was letting me know that because of his job, he could access information about me without my consent. And the worst part, he didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with that. I tried to laugh it off, but it wasn't funny. I started thinking about my own information, my financial details, my social security number, everything. Was he just looking up my credit score? Did he know my entire history? My heart was racing, and I could feel my palms starting to sweat. I needed to change the subject, but I wasn't sure how. It felt like I couldn't escape the conversation. So, I said, trying to steer things in a different direction. How did you end up in debt collection? Sounds like a pretty intense field to get into. Matt didn't miss a beat. It's all about numbers. I'm good with patterns, and I've always been curious about how people handle money. Most people don't even know how much they're in debt until it's too late, but I can spot the signs pretty early on. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. It wasn't just that Matt had a strange job. It was that he was using his job to make me feel exposed. How many people had he checked like this? How many times had he used his professional access to gather personal information out someone? And now he was sitting here telling me all about it as though it was completely normal. I wanted to leave, I really did. But I didn't know how to handle the situation without making a scene. I kept my voice steady and said, I think I'm going to head out. I had a long day and I'm starting to feel a bit tired. Matt gave me a surprised look. Wait, really? We were just getting started. Yeah, I'm just not feeling it anymore, I said, forcing a smile. It was nice meeting you, though. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out of the bar. My mind was racing the entire time. Had Matt really looked up my credit score? What else had he found out about me that I didn't know? I tried to shake the feeling, but it was impossible. The whole date felt like a violation, like he was using his job to manipulate me. Once I got home, I did what I should have done earlier. I Googled him. It wasn't that I was expecting to find anything particularly incriminating, but I needed to know. What kind of guy was I dealing with? Sure enough, there it was. His name linked to the debt collection agency he worked for. And when I dug a little deeper, I found that the company he worked for had a reputation. They were known for running background checks on people without asking permission, for using private information to manipulate their clients into paying off old debts they couldn't afford. It was all there plain as day. I deleted his number. Blocked him on Tinder. I didn't want to hear from him again. What Matt had done, or what he could have done, was a clear violation of privacy, and I wasn't going to be part of it. I told myself I'd learned something important that night. Trust your instincts. No matter how charming someone seems, if something feels off, it probably is. And Matt, he definitely wasn't worth the risk. I didn't think anything of it when she said she'd be bringing someone with her. Olivia and I had only been messaging for a few days, and when she texted, "Hope it's cool if my dad tags along. He's super chill," I honestly thought she was joking. Like maybe it was some kind of sarcastic Tinder humor. So I replied with a laugh emoji and said, "Sure, can't wait to meet the whole family." She never corrected me. She just replied, "You'll love him." I should have taken that more seriously. The place she picked was this kind of upscale diner, not a fancy restaurant, but definitely not casual either. The kind of spot where they call ketchup tomato reduction, and everything on the menu is served on a wooden board. She picked the time too, noon on a Sunday. Weird choice for a first date, but I didn't have plans, so I went with it. I figured maybe she just wanted to keep it light. Public place, easy exit if it didn't go well. That made sense to me. I showed up a little early because I didn't want to be that guy who's late on a first date, especially since she picked the time and place. I was standing just inside the entrance when I saw her walking up through the window, and then I froze. She wasn't alone. Right next to her was a tall guy with gray hair and a blazer that looked like it belonged to a lawyer. He was walking stiffly, like this wasn't a casual lunch. It was more like he was heading into a courtroom. They walked in together, and she smiled like nothing was weird. Introduced him immediately. "This is my dad, Jeff." No explanation, no joke, just like that. And he held out his hand like it was the most normal thing in the world. I shook it because what else was I supposed to do? I felt so off balance, and I hadn't even ordered a drink yet. We sat down, and from the moment we opened the menus, it became very clear that this was not just lunch. It wasn't even a just tagging along kind of thing. Jeff, Mr. Chill Dad, was leading the entire interaction. He started asking me questions almost instantly. Not small talk either. He wanted to know what I did for work, how much I made, whether I had health insurance. No joke. He literally asked what my plan was in 5 years. I thought I was applying for a loan, not going on a date. Olivia didn't say much at first. She just sat there eating her salad like this was totally fine. I kept glancing at her like, "Are you hearing this? Are you gonna step in at some point?" But she never did. She just smiled and nodded like she agreed with everything he said. At one point, he asked me if I was emotionally stable, and when I kind of laughed, because who asks that? He said, "That's not something to joke about." Straight face, dead serious. I wanted to leave right then, but I didn't know how to get out of it without making a scene. The place was small, the tables were close together, and the waiter had already brought our drinks. So I sat there, sweating under the pressure of this man's job interview from hell, trying not to explode. I answered every question politely, trying to be vague without sounding like I was hiding something. Then he pulled out a notebook, an actual notebook, opened it on the table, and said, "So here's what we're looking for." And I was like, "What?" I leaned in, thinking maybe I misheard. But no, he started reading off a list. Someone with a reliable income, no criminal record, family-oriented, ideally religious but not essential, college degree preferred but not mandatory if you have upward mobility. I swear I thought I was being pranked. I kept looking around for a camera crew, like maybe this was a new reality show or social experiment or something. Olivia didn't seem embarrassed at all. She even added her own comment after he read the list, saying something like, "He forgot to mention that I want at least 2 kids." And then she laughed and nudged me like it was cute. I didn't know what to say. I honestly felt frozen. My brain just stopped working. I hadn't even finished half my sandwich. Meanwhile, Jeff was still flipping pages like he had backup questions just in case I survived the first round. I started staring at the window behind him, thinking about how easy it would be to just slide out of my chair, walk out the front door, and never look back. Eventually, I said I needed to use the bathroom. Got up, walked straight past the restroom, out the door, and didn't stop walking for 3 blocks. I didn't run. I didn't panic. I just walked with purpose that I had somewhere very important to be, and that place was literally anywhere but that table. She texted me later. 2 messages. One said, "Thought you handled yourself well." The other said, "My dad really liked you." I stared at those words like they were in a foreign language. I didn't reply. I didn't block her either. I just left the conversation hanging like that thread in your sweater you keep meaning to cut off but don't. I told a couple of friends about it and got mixed reactions. Some thought it was hilarious, others said it was a major red flag. Personally, I didn't find it funny. I found it confusing. Like, why not just meet for a normal date and tell me you're close with your dad? Why ambush me like that? Was this her way of fast-tracking the process? We got the ones who wouldn't survive the Inquisition. The more I thought about it, the more it creeped me out. It wasn't just about the dad being there. It was how formal it all was, how she was clearly in on it. That whole this thing, that wasn't a joke. That was real. She probably had a spreadsheet somewhere with names and scores. And what if I had said, what would the second date have been? A polygraph? I still get nervous when someone says they're close to their family. I'm not saying people shouldn't involve their parents in their lives. That's great. But not like that. Not as a test. Not like an interview where the job is boyfriend and your application is reviewed over paninis and overpriced coffee. That was the last time I let my curiosity get the better of me. Now when someone says, "You'll love my dad," I just swipe left every time. I've been on a decent run of okay-ish dates at the time. Nothing that led anywhere, but at least nobody made me feel like I was in danger or part of a social experiment. That streak ended with Daniel. I didn't realize it at first, obviously. I thought he was one of the better ones. He had this really calm energy in his photos. Nothing flashy. No shirtless mirror selfies or weird group shots where you had to guess who he was. His messages were thoughtful, a little funny, and even though I usually hate voice notes, his were short and didn't sound like someone selling crypto. So yeah, I gave him a chance. We met at this outdoor cafe. Kind of trendy, but not in a try-hard way. I liked it because the tables were spaced out and you didn't have to shout to hear each other. He was already there when I arrived, sitting with a coffee and reading something on his phone. When he looked up, he smiled and waved like we were old friends. It wasn't awkward at all. We clicked almost immediately. He was easy to talk to. I remember thinking he asked better questions than most people. Not the usual boring, what do you do type stuff. He asked me what I liked about my job, or what I did on days I was completely free. About 20 minutes into the date, he complimented me. He said I had a refreshing natural vibe, which, okay, was a weird way to say it, but I let it go. I was wearing jeans and barely any makeup. Nothing fancy. I joked that I didn't feel like putting in much effort that day, and he laughed and said, "No, I love that. Honestly, I've always been drawn to women who don't rely on cosmetic stuff to feel attractive." At the time, I thought it was just a clumsy compliment. Guys say things like that all the time. What I didn't realize was that it wasn't just a preference. It was the hill he'd chosen to die on. The next weird thing he said was about my eyebrows. He said, "It's so rare to see brows that haven't been tampered with." I laughed because, okay, Wu says, tampered. But I told him I actually did get them done sometimes, just not recently. He paused and looked a little disappointed. That threw me, like visibly disappointed, as if I let him down. Then he asked, "What about other stuff? You ever had anything done?" I blinked. Done like what? He leaned in slightly like we were sharing secrets, like Botox or fillers or anything. No judgment. I just like knowing what's real. That's when I realized this wasn't curiosity. It was an evaluation. I told him no, I hadn't done anything like that, and he relaxed a little like I'd passed some kind of test. I didn't love that, but I brushed it off. We were still early in the date, and part of me wanted to see where it would go. Maybe it was just a weird moment, right? Wrong. Because after that, it just kept going. He started listing all these actresses and models he used to like but lost respect for once he found out they'd had work done. He actually said, "It's just sad when people can't be comfortable in their own skin." He said this while sipping an iced latte with oat milk and talking about how much he respected authenticity. I remember sitting there trying to keep a straight face because I wasn't sure if I was on a date or a lecture series. It wasn't even that he had a preference. People are allowed to like what they like. It was how intense he got about it. He wasn't just saying he liked natural looks. He was judging anyone who didn't fit that category. And not quietly either. He actually said, "It's a red flag when someone's face doesn't move, like it was a moral issue." The worst part came when I asked what he thought about things like makeup or skincare. He said makeup was a mask and he only tolerated it when it was absolutely minimal. Then he said, "I'd honestly be pretty turned off if I found out you wore a lot of it regularly." It said something about a person. That's when I stopped trying to be polite. I asked, "What does it say exactly?" And he said, "It usually means they're insecure or worse, superficial." I stared at him for a second, wondering if he was joking. But no, he really meant it. He was sitting there, a guy wearing designer sneakers and a watch that definitely wasn't cheap, talking about how people who wear foundation are superficial. I almost laughed. He kept going too. Started asking more personal stuff, like if I'd ever considered changing anything about myself. Just curious, he said, like that made it okay. I was done at that point. I told him I had to head out soon and grab the bill before he could offer. I didn't want any part of this date lingering past the awkward goodbye. As I stood up, he actually had the nerve to say, "You know, you're really attractive. I hope you never lose that by falling into all the trends." I didn't respond. I just said, "Good luck," and walked out. On the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about how sneaky it all was. He started off so normal, friendly, chill, and then slowly pulled me into this bizarre set of standards he'd made up in his head. I wasn't a person to him. I was a checklist of features. If I had failed even one of them, that would have been it. He texted me a few hours later. "I had a really great time. You're rare these days. Hope to see you again." I didn't reply. There was nothing else to say. I wasn't rare. I was just patient enough to sit through his entire monologue without flipping the table. After that, I updated my dating profile. Added a new line, "Not interested in auditions." Still get weird messages, but at least I know what to walk away from now. And if someone compliments my natural vibe in the first 5 minutes, I already know what's coming next. I hadn't been out in a while. Not because I was heartbroken or super busy or anything like that. I just got tired. Tired of repeating the same conversations with people who felt like cardboard cutouts. But then one night I matched with Jessica, and it actually felt kind of different. She had this mix of confidence and chaos in her bio. Said she loved karaoke, crime documentaries, and messy honesty. I didn't really know what that meant, but I was bored, so I went with it. We started chatting, and she was funny, like actually funny. Not just meme funny or sarcastic funny. She had timing clever replies, weird one-liners that made no sense but somehow landed. We talked on and off for a few days before she asked if I wanted to meet up for drinks. It felt impulsive and last minute, which honestly kind of matched her whole vibe. She picked a bar, not some sleek lounge or trendy rooftop. It was a loud, davy kind of place, packed even on a Wednesday. One of those spots with sticky floors and pool tables no one uses except to set down empty glasses. I wasn't mad about it. It felt like the opposite of every overly curated date I'd been on. Just simple and chaotic. I got there first, grabbed a booth near the back. 10 minutes later, she walked in wearing a leather jacket and this massive tote bag, like the kind you take to the beach. She slid into the seat across from me and tossed the bag onto the bench like it weighed nothing. We ordered drinks, and right away it was like we were already halfway through our conversation. No weird pauses, no small talk about jobs or traffic. Just easy, fast-paced banter that somehow made sense. Things were going great for maybe the first hour. Then, out of nowhere, she started checking her phone a lot. Not just casual checking, but full-on texting with urgency. She'd glance up and throw me these little sorry smiles, but she didn't explain anything. I figured maybe something was going on with a friend or whatever. I didn't want to pry. Then she asked me to order her another drink while she ran to the bathroom. I said sure as she got up, and I watched her grab her bag and head toward the back. That was the last time I saw her for over 2 hours. At first, I didn't think it would be that long. I just sat there waiting, sipping both drinks, watching the door to the bathroom. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. I started to wonder if maybe she left. Like maybe it was a prank or some bizarre flake move I'd never seen before. I even walked back toward the bathroom to see if she was okay. Nothing. I asked a bartender if they'd seen her, but they hadn't. Eventually, I went back to the booth and just sat there, trying not to feel ridiculous. An hour in, I was about to leave. I'd already paid for the drinks. My phone was on the table. I was debating texting her when suddenly she reappeared, all out of breath and looking flustered. She sat down like nothing had happened. Said, "Sorry about that, it got a little hectic," and just started drinking her cocktail like she'd only been gone 5 minutes. I stared at her. "Where were you?" She sighed and said her ex had shown up and things got complicated. That was all she offered. No details, no apology beyond that one sentence. Just casually jumped back into conversation like we hadn't skipped half the night. I didn't even know how to react. I was equal parts confused, annoyed, and weirdly curious. I asked, "Wait, your ex? Why would he be here?" And she shrugged and said something like, "It's a long story," before laughing it off. That's when I noticed she was acting different. Not bad different, just more intense. Like she was overly focused on me now, asking deep questions, leaning in, complimenting me in this weirdly performative way. She kept saying things like, "You're way more grounded than I expected, and you're probably too stable for someone like me." And I didn't know why, but something felt off. I had missed a page in the story. It was like the first half of the date was a pilot episode, and now I was watching season 3. About 20 minutes after she came back, this guy walked past our table. He didn't look at us, didn't stop. Just walked right by, but Jessica froze. Her whole vibe shifted. She grabbed her bag tightly, turned her face away, and muttered, "Great." I followed her gaze, and I knew immediately that was the ex. He didn't approach us or make a scene, but Jessica couldn't let it go. She started talking louder, leaning closer, laughing in this exaggerated way. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about making sure that guy saw her happy and moved on. I was the prop. The rest of the date, if you can even call it that, was a blubber. I realized I was sitting in the middle of someone else's drama, like a background character who accidentally got pulled into the spotlight. I stopped responding as much, and eventually she must have noticed, because she got quieter too. When the check came, she didn't offer to split it or even say thanks. She just said, "Well, that was a night," and gave me this weird, unreadable smile, like we were both pretending this had been something it wasn't. We walked out together, but she didn't wait around, just waved, said, "Good luck with everything," and disappeared into the street. I stood there for a second, not sure what had just happened. I checked my phone and saw 0 missed messages or explanations. Later that night, I checked her Instagram out of curiosity. Public profile. Her latest story was a selfie from earlier at the bar. Me in the blurry background, totally untagged, with the caption, "New chapter." So, yeah. Turns out I was a plot device in her personal soap opera. After that, I started asking more direct questions before dates. Not just "what do you do" or "what are you looking for?" I started asking, "Is there anyone who thinks they're still dating you?" And, "Are you emotionally done with your last relationship?" People laugh when I say that, but honestly, I don't care. I'm done being a side character in someone else's story. I thought I was being pretty smart when I matched with Hannah. We had some solid back and forth texting for a couple of days before deciding to meet up. Her profile was down to earth, and she seemed like one of those women who knew what she wanted. I liked that. There was no cryptic messaging or weird emoji overload. Just clear, easygoing conversation. We both agreed on a cozy little cafe in the city. Nothing fancy, but it had that cool vibe where it felt relaxed but not too chill, if that makes sense. Perfect for a first date, in my opinion. I showed up a little early just to get a feel for the place. I found a nice little corner and sat down with a coffee. It wasn't long before she walked in. Hannah had this easy confidence about her. She was dressed simply but looked effortlessly stylish, and she smiled as soon as she saw me, like we were already friends. It felt good right off the bat. We started chatting, and it was clear we had a lot in common. She loved to travel, was into photography, and we both had a thing for music festivals. I could tell she wasn't just giving surface level answers. She was genuinely interested in getting to know me. There were no red flags, no weird pauses, nothing that made me feel uncomfortable. Just two people having a great conversation. We got along so well that I didn't even notice the time slipping by. But then the conversation took a weird turn. Out of nowhere, she said, "I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I'm looking for something serious. I want a guy who can provide for me." I blinked. Wait, what? I didn't know what to say at first. It wasn't that I wasn't looking for a serious relationship, but the way she said it threw me off. It wasn't the most casual thing to throw out there in the middle of a coffee date, right? I mean, I wasn't even sure what she meant by provide. But before I could say anything, she added, "I'm really looking for someone who's stable and can support me while I figure out the next steps in my life." I didn't know how to respond. I'd been on some bad dates before, but nothing like this. This felt like a job interview, but with way higher stakes. I asked her to clarify what she meant, and she smiled like she was explaining something obvious. I'm in a bit of a transition period, she said, and I just want a guy who's financially secure. I'm not saying I can't take care of myself. I just want to know I'm with someone who can support me emotionally and well financially. I stared at her. Sure, I had a good job, but this was a lot to throw at someone on a first date. She wasn't saying she was looking for someone who could support her dreams or ambitions. No, she was talking about financial stability like it was an expectation, not a preference. I tried to shift the conversation, but it didn't get any better. She went on about how she wasn't into the whole struggle thing, how she needed someone who could take care of her while she figured out her career and found herself. That was the point where I had to stop myself from laughing. It was such a bizarre mix of entitled and confusing that I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. Was she being serious? Was this a test? Or was she just looking for someone to take the financial burden off her shoulders while she figured out her next steps? I tried to steer the conversation back to something more neutral, like her hobbies or anything that didn't make me feel like I was in the middle of some weird business transaction, but she kept circling back to the same point. I'm not saying you have to do everything for me, but I definitely can't date someone who doesn't have his life together, she said, running her fingers through her hair. I just can't waste time with guys who don't have the financial security I need. It's just the way I see things. Okay, at this point, I was ready to get up and leave. This wasn't what I signed up for. This wasn't a casual coffee date where we could talk about music, books, or travel. This felt like I was being evaluated as a potential sponsor for her lifestyle. I started feeling like I wasn't a person to her. I was a resource. But I wanted to stay cool. I didn't want to be rude. I tried to reason with her, not out of some desperate need to win her over, but because I genuinely couldn't wrap my head around her viewpoint. I get the whole wanting to be with someone who's stable, I said, trying to keep my tone calm. But don't you think a relationship is more about emotional support, mutual respect, and growing together? She nodded, but looked at me like I had three heads. Of course, but emotional support only gets you so far. If a guy can't take care of himself, how is he supposed to take care of me? I couldn't help but feel like I was in the middle of a nightmare. I was just sitting there listening to her talk about stability and security like they were the most important things in the world. I kept thinking, is this what people are actually like on dates? Maybe I was being naive, but I always thought that connections were built on a foundation of trust, communication, and shared values, not financial obligations. But no matter how many times I tried to bring the conversation back to something more meaningful, she wasn't having it. It was like she was on a mission, and nothing was going to stop her from getting what she needed, whether that meant a new boyfriend or a walking paycheck. It felt like the whole conversation was a transaction waiting to happen. Eventually, I just couldn't take it anymore. I decided I had to call it quits. I told her I had to go, politely finish my coffee, and made my way out the door. She seemed a little surprised, but not upset. I don't think she even realized how strange the whole thing had been. I didn't text her after that. There was nothing left to say. I wasn't looking for someone to take care of me. And I sure as hell wasn't about to start dating someone who expected me to financially back their life while they found themselves. In the end, I realized that I wasn't looking for a partner who saw relationships as a financial arrangement. And maybe that's the lesson. It's not always about who could offer the most. It's about finding someone who sees you for who you are, not as a bank account or an investment opportunity. If someone is more interested in securing a life of luxury than they are in actually building a life together, it's probably best to keep looking. So this whole thing with Ethan started off pretty normal. I'd matched with him on a dating app, and his profile wasn't anything too out of the ordinary. Nice pictures, a decent bio, the usual stuff. We'd been texting for a few days before I agreed to meet up, and he seemed cool enough. He wasn't rushing me into anything, which was a relief. I hate when people try to move too fast. I like the pace. He said he was a single guy living in this cute little house just outside of town. The way he talked about his life didn't raise any flags. He sounded normal. The plan was for me to come over, hang out, maybe grab a drink or just watch a movie. Simple stuff. So when I showed up at his house on that Saturday afternoon, I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I had my usual nerves, but nothing out of the ordinary. But then, when I knocked on the door, the last thing I expected was a little kid to answer. Hey, are you Ethan's friend? The kid asked me, looking up at me with wide eyes. He couldn't have been older than 7 or 8. I froze for a second, unsure of what to do. It felt awkward, like some weird sitcom moment. Well, yeah, is he here? I asked, trying to sound calm, though my head was racing. Before he could answer, I heard Ethan's voice from inside. Liam, what are you doing? Who's at the door? I could hear him walking toward the front hallway, and I started to get this uneasy feeling in my stomach. I was about to meet this dude for the first time, and now I was meeting his kid, who, by the way, was just standing there staring at me like I was the most confusing person he'd ever seen. Ethan walked into the hallway looking a little flustered. He gave a nervous smile and glanced at me, then at the kid. Liam, go play in the other room for a sec, okay? Liam didn't move. He just kept looking at me like I was the answer to a really weird riddle. Who's this? He asked, still staring. Ethan knelt down in front of him and whispered something in his ear, which made Liam finally nod and walk off down the hall. Ethan closed the door behind him and turned to me with that same nervous grin. Sorry about that, he said, running a hand through his hair. I didn't want to, scare you off too soon. I just blinked at him. What do you mean? He sighed, clearly uncomfortable now. I didn't mention I had a kid because, well, it's not exactly a first date conversation, I didn't want to freak you out. I wasn't really sure how to respond. Part of me was surprised, but another part of me wasn't that shocked. I mean, I've been on enough dates to know that people didn't always share everything right away. Still, it felt off. Like he'd intentionally hidden this huge part of his life from me. It made me feel weird. We made small talk for a few minutes after that, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was up. Ethan seemed genuinely nice, but there was this vibe I couldn't quite put my finger on. I'd been expecting a casual date, but now was here in his house with his kid just wandering around like it was no big deal. When Liam came back into the room, Ethan tried to make it sound casual, like he was just the coolest dad ever. He mentioned something about how Liam's mom wasn't around much, which seemed like an attempt to play it off. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much he had left out. A kid is a big deal, and I don't care how chill you are. If you got a kid, that's not something you just spring on someone when they show up at your front door. The whole thing felt kind of forced. Ethan seemed to want me to be okay with it, but I wasn't really sure what it was. After about an hour of awkward conversation, I decided it was time to go. I wasn't mad or anything, just kind of weirded out. Ethan walked me to the door, still trying to act like everything was fine, but his eyes said otherwise. So, do you want to do this again sometime? He asked, looking at me hopefully. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, but I just wasn't sure how to respond. There was a lot going on here that I didn't know about, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to jump into all of that. Maybe, I said, forcing a smile. I'll think about it. I could tell that it wasn't exactly the answer he wanted, but I wasn't going to commit to something I wasn't sure about. As I walked to my car, I couldn't stop thinking about how this all played out. It felt like he'd been hiding this major part of his life from me, and that just didn't sit right. I'd been upfront about everything with him. Why couldn't he do the same? But then again, maybe he really didn't want to scare me off, and maybe he thought he was doing the right thing by waiting. Who knows? Either way, I wasn't sure if I was up for being someone's second choice after a kid and all the other baggage that came with it. It wasn't about Liam. He was just a kid, and that wasn't his fault. It was more about Ethan. It felt like he wasn't being totally upfront with me, and that kind of bothered me more than I cared to admit. So, yeah, I don't think I'll be seeing Ethan again. I didn't hate him or anything, but it just felt off. I'm all for honesty, and if someone's hiding big stuff, it doesn't sit well with me. Maybe next time they can tell me about their life before I end up meeting their kid. I met Lauren on Tinder like a lot of people do these days. Her profile was pretty standard, but there was something about her pictures that caught my eye. She wasn't doing the whole looking off into the distance vibe or posting a bunch of group shots with random people you had to guess were her. It was just her, genuine, straightforward. I liked that. Her bio was short, but it stood out. It mentioned something about enjoying spontaneous trips and binge watching Netflix documentaries. Simple, but it felt real, and I appreciated that. We started texting, and things went well. We clicked, talking about everything and nothing at all. The banter was easy. The conversation never ran dry. After a couple of days, we agreed to meet up. Nothing too intense, a coffee date, casual and low-key. When I showed up, she was sitting at a table near the window, sipping on what I guessed was a caramel macchiato, based on the cup in front of her. I was a little nervous, to be honest, but she had a way of making it feel like we were just old friends catching up. The conversation flowed even better in person. I found myself relaxed, laughing at her jokes, and genuinely interested in everything she had to say. We talked for hours, covering everything from our favorite foods to the dumbest things we'd done as kids. She told me she loved traveling, which I'd already gathered from her profile, and mentioned that I'd been to a few places in Europe, and how I was planning on going back soon. She seemed intrigued. We agreed to plan a trip together, joking about how we should probably start with a weekend away before committing to anything international. It was easy with her. Everything just clicked. We went on a few more dates, each one better than the last. It felt like I'd finally met someone who wasn't trying too hard, who just wanted to have a good time and enjoy life. I could picture a future with her, no problem. Then, out of nowhere, she ghosted me. I didn't think much of it at first because, hey, it happens. People get busy, life gets in the way, or maybe something just doesn't click after a few dates. But it wasn't like her to leave me hanging. She'd always been responsive before, even if it was just a quick text saying she was busy. I gave it a few days, then reached out. No response. Another few days went by and still nothing. At that point, I figured I'd probably never hear from her again. It wasn't the end of the world, but it was a little disappointing. Then about a week later, I was scrolling through Reddit trying to kill time. I was on one of those random subreddits, the ones where people share their experiences with online dating. And there it was, Lauren's name, right in the middle of a post. It wasn't hard to find. The title of the post had her profile picture attached. And when I clicked on it, my heart kind of dropped. She had made a post on a subreddit about her Tinder experiences, and not just any post. She was reviewing her matches like they were on Yelp or something. It wasn't a casual, here's a funny thing that happened, either. No, this was a full-blown review of her recent Tinder interactions, with ratings for each guy she'd gone on a date with. And surprise, surprise, I was one of them. I felt a weird mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to laugh because of how absurd it all was. Another part of me was just straight up confused. I didn't even know how to feel about it. I had no idea this was something people did. I guess it's one thing to talk to your friends about your dates, but writing it down for strangers to read, reviewing people like you're a food critic at a restaurant, that was something else. I clicked on her post and started reading through it. She didn't mention me by name, but it didn't take a genius to figure out who she was talking about. The description matched me perfectly, from the coffee date to the Netflix binge recommendations we'd made. I was getting this weird feeling like I was the subject of some random review in a bizarrely public setting. She wrote about how our date went, and honestly, it wasn't terrible. In fact, it sounded like we had a great time. She mentioned how much we'd laughed and how easy the conversation was. But then, of course, she had to add the rating. Her post wasn't just a recap of the date, it was her thoughts on how well it went, broken down into categories like chemistry, conversation, and overall vibe. I was shocked. The thing that threw me off the most was that she gave me a 6 out of 10 for chemistry. And then, in the comment section, she'd added a little update. Didn't really feel a spark with this one, but he was nice enough. Definitely wouldn't go for a second date. Now, I don't know about you, but when I've been on a date with someone and we've had a genuinely good time, I don't expect to get a 6 out of 10. I figured I was at least a solid 8, maybe even at 9 if I was being generous with myself. But a 6, that hit differently. It was a strange feeling, reading about yourself from someone else's perspective, especially when that perspective was so detached and clinical. It wasn't even just the rating that got to me. It was the fact that she felt the need to put it online, like it was some kind of commodity being reviewed. She wasn't the only one either. She had reviewed a bunch of guys, rating them with little comments like they were all part of some experiment. The whole thing felt weird, like I was part of some game I didn't know I was playing. I should have just let go and moved on. It wasn't like I was emotionally invested at that point. But there was this thing inside me that made me want to know why. Why had she ghosted me? Why had she gone from being all in to completely dropping off the map? So I decided to message her. No big speech, no anger, just a simple text. Hey, I saw your Reddit post. Thought we had a great time, but the review was a little unexpected. What happened? She read it, and after what felt like forever, replied with a simple, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. I just didn't feel a connection after our date. I didn't know how to tell you, so I did what I thought was easiest. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was still annoyed, but another part of me got it. I mean, if she wasn't feeling it, she wasn't feeling it. But costing me, then reviewing me online like I was some sort of product, that was a whole other level of weird. In the end, we left it at that. I deleted the Reddit post from my mind, though I'll never forget the weirdness of seeing myself reviewed like that. It was a reminder that dating is full of surprises, some good, some bad. And sometimes, even when everything seems perfect, you'll still get ghosted for reasons you'll never fully understand. I have been talking to Tyler for a few weeks, and honestly, I thought we were hitting it off pretty well. His texts were always witty, and we had a lot in common. He was one of those guys who seemed down to earth, with no weird vibe or strange expectations. He didn't pressure me into anything, and I respected that. When he suggested meeting up, I was all for it. We decided to grab coffee at a park near downtown, a spot that seemed perfect for a relaxed hangout. The day came, and I showed up a little early just to scope things out. I found a spot under a big tree, the kind that gives just the right amount of shade on a warm afternoon. It was one of those days when the sun's out, but not too hot, just perfect for sitting outside and chatting. I was just settling in when Tyler texted me that he had arrived. I looked up and saw him walking toward me, a camera hanging around his neck. He was taller than I expected, with messy hair and a casual vibe that made him seem pretty chill. He gave me a quick wave and smiled as he approached. I couldn't help but smile back. It was a relief. There was no awkwardness. We greeted each other like old friends and sat down on a bench under the tree, the park bustling with people walking their dogs and families hanging out. We talked for a bit, exchanged the usual small talk. And then, without much warning, he said, "I brought my camera. Do you mind if I take some pictures? I like to capture moments, you know." I was a bit surprised, but I shrugged it off. I mean, he had mentioned being into photography before, so it wasn't completely out of left field. I told him I didn't mind, figuring it would just be a few casual shots here and there. But as he lifted the camera, I noticed something strange in his eyes. There was this glint, like he was waiting for something to happen. It didn't really click in my head at the time, but looking back, I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. He asked me to stand up and move to a different spot in the park. I agreed, figuring he just wanted a different backdrop for the pictures. But when I stood up, he directed me to stand in this really odd, posed way, kind of off-center, like I was supposed to be doing something. He told me to look off into the distance, but in the most specific way. Turn your body more this way, no, like this. Now look up. Not too much, just a little. Perfect. Hold that pose. It felt strange. I'm not a model, and I wasn't used to being told to look a certain way for a picture. But I played along, thinking it was just his artistic side coming through. I tried to relax, though the whole situation was starting to feel a bit off. After a few more shots, he had me do another pose. This time, he told me to look more intimate, like I was in some kind of romantic moment. I mean, it was a park. There were families nearby, and here I was pretending to be in some staged photo shoot. I felt uncomfortable, but didn't want to make a scene. Tyler was a nice guy after all. He didn't seem malicious. He just seemed strange. But then, as he clicked the camera again, I'd noticed something in his face that made my stomach drop. It wasn't the casual vibe I thought he had. There was something more intense in his gaze, like he was really into it. He kept telling me how beautiful I looked, how my pose was perfect. I was starting to feel like I was trapped in a weird situation, caught between being polite and just trying to get through this uncomfortable moment. I stepped back after a few more shots and asked, "Hey, so what kind of photos are you going for here?" I tried to sound casual, like I wasn't freaked out, but honestly, I was starting to get a little anxious. Tyler grinned and lowered the camera, then took a step closer. "I just like capturing natural moments," he said, which sounded like a perfectly fine answer. But something in his tone didn't sit right with me. It wasn't exactly reassuring. He stood a little too close for comfort, and I suddenly realized that the whole thing wasn't about photography. It was about control. He wasn't just taking pictures, he was staging a scene, guiding me into these oddly intimate poses that made me feel uncomfortable. "Can we just chill for a bit?" I said, trying to steer the conversation away from the photos. I thought we were just gonna hang out. Tyler's smile faded a little, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded and backed up a few steps, finally lowering his camera. We sat down again, but the mood had shifted. The easy flow of conversation we had earlier wasn't there anymore. I was now hyper aware of every word I said, trying to act like everything was fine, but inside I just wanted to leave. I kept wondering why I hadn't caught on to it sooner. Why hadn't I noticed the way he was making me feel weird and uncomfortable? For the next few minutes, we talked, but I felt like I was just going through the motions. He asked me some more questions about my job, my family. I gave him short answers, hoping he'd get the hint that I wasn't enjoying this date anymore. But Tyler didn't pick up on it. Instead, he started showing me the pictures he had taken. At first, I just nodded along, but the more I looked at the photos, the more I realized something. The poses weren't just awkward, they were intensely personal. He'd captured moments that felt way too intimate for a first date. There was one shot where I was turned away, but the angle made it seem like I was looking longingly into the distance. It was weird. And then there was another one where I was mid-laugh, but it looked more like I was caught in some kind of deep private moment. I felt exposed. These weren't casual pictures. They were taken with an agenda. It was like he was trying to create a narrative that didn't exist between us, like he was trying to turn me into something else. Something I wasn't. I didn't want to confront him directly, so I stood up, offering a smile that I hoped looked natural. I think I'm gonna head out soon, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Tyler seemed to sense the change in my energy. Oh, sure, no problem. I'll walk you to your car, he said, packing up his camera slowly. I couldn't wait to get out of there. The walk to my car was painfully awkward, and when we got there, I gave him a quick hug. Nothing too personal, just a polite gesture. He tried to ask if we could do another photo session soon, but I just nodded, told him I'd think about it, and quickly got in my car. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been off. Tyler seemed like a nice enough guy at first, but in the end, it felt like I had been a part of something I didn't agree to. I wasn't sure what his intentions were with those photos, but I wasn't interested in finding out. Maybe he was just a photographer who got too caught up in his art. But whatever the reason, I wasn't going to stick around to figure it out. For the next few minutes, we talked, but I felt like I was just going through the motions. He asked me some more questions about my job, my family. I gave him short answers, hoping he'd get the hint that I wasn't enjoying this date anymore. But Tyler didn't pick up on it. Instead, he started showing me the pictures he had taken. At first, I just nodded along, but the more I looked at the photos, the more I realized something. The poses weren't just awkward, they were intensely personal. He'd captured moments that felt way too intimate for a first date. There was one shot where I was turned away, but the angle made it seem like I was looking longingly into the distance. It was weird. And then there was another one where I was mid-laugh, but it looked more like I was caught in some kind of deep private moment. I felt exposed. These weren't casual pictures. They were taken with an agenda. It was like he was trying to create a narrative that didn't exist between us, like he was trying to turn me into something else. Something I wasn't. I didn't want to confront him directly, so I stood up, offering a smile that I hoped looked natural. I think I'm gonna head out soon, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Tyler seemed to sense the change in my energy. Oh, sure, no problem. I'll walk you to your car, he said, packing up his camera slowly. I couldn't wait to get out of there. The walk to my car was painfully awkward, and when we got there, I gave him a quick hug. Nothing too personal, just a polite gesture. He tried to ask if we could do another photo session soon, but I just nodded, told him I'd think about it, and quickly got in my car. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been off. Tyler seemed like a nice enough guy at first, but in the end, it felt like I had been a part of something I didn't agree to. I wasn't sure what his intentions were with those photos, but I wasn't interested in finding out. Maybe he was just a photographer who got too caught up in his art. But whatever the reason, I wasn't going to stick around to figure it out. I don't know why I didn't pick up on the signs earlier. Maybe I was just caught up in the excitement of finally meeting someone who seemed like a real catch. Megan and I had been talking for a while, and things had been going great. She had a way of making everything seem effortless, and I found myself enjoying every conversation. She was funny, smart, and had this infectious energy about her that made you want to be around her. She had all the qualities I was looking for, and when she suggested I come over to her place one night, I thought, why not? The plan was simple: dinner, some drinks, and maybe just hanging out. Nothing too fancy, nothing too serious. I was excited, and she seemed just as eager. When I showed up, she greeted me at the door with a big smile, wearing an oversized sweater and leggings, looking casual but effortlessly cool. She led me inside, and I couldn't help but feel at ease in her place. It wasn't anything over the top. It was just a cozy apartment with some art on the walls, a few plants, and the smell of something cooking in the kitchen. We sat down on her couch, chatted about our days, and had some drinks. The conversation flowed easily, and everything felt perfectly normal. Megan seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, and I was the same way. We laughed, we joked, and I started to feel like I was really getting to know her. But there was a moment around the time we finished dinner when she casually mentioned something that immediately caught me off guard. So, I'm actually filming content for my dating blog, she said, almost like it was just a random fact as if it had nothing to do with what we were doing. I blinked at her, not entirely sure I'd heard her right. Wait, what? She smiled a little too casually and shrugged. Yeah, just a few quick videos here and there. I like to document my experiences, share my thoughts on the whole dating world. I didn't know how to respond. It wasn't exactly what I had expected to hear. I mean, I knew she was into social media and had a pretty active Instagram, but a dating blog. That was a whole new level of transparency. I wasn't sure how I felt about the idea of being content for someone's blog, but I was trying to keep things light. It wasn't a huge deal, right? I mean, people share all kinds of things online these days. She must have seen my confusion because she quickly added, "Don't worry, it's nothing serious. It's more like a hobby. It's just a fun way to talk about my experiences, and I thought you'd be cool with it." I didn't want to be rude, so I smiled and nodded. "Yeah, sure, whatever works for you." But then she hit me with something else that completely threw me off. So, she began, biting her lip. "I have a waiver here for you to sign. Just a formality. I like to cover my bases, especially with everything I post." I stared at her for a moment, unsure if she was joking. A waiver. Why did she need me to sign something for a blog post? My mind started racing. Was I missing something? Was this normal? "You want me to sign a waiver for a blog?" I asked, half laughing, trying to figure out if she was serious. She nodded, still smiling, as she pulled out a piece of paper from a folder on the coffee table and handed it over to me. "Yeah, it's just a basic thing. It says that you're aware I'm posting about our date and that you're fine with it. All the legal stuff." I felt a weird knot in my stomach. A legal form for a dating blog? Was this what I'd signed up for? I had barely known her a few weeks, and I was apparently a part of some online documentation of her dating life. It didn't sit right with me. I mean, I'd been on dates before, but I'd never been asked to sign a waiver. This was definitely new. I looked at the paper, scanning the text, but it all seemed like a bunch of legal jargon. I wasn't a lawyer, so I couldn't make heads or tails of it. But I did know one thing for sure: this felt off. I wasn't comfortable with this, and I had no idea what I was agreeing to by signing it. Sure, I could just say no, but I also didn't want to seem like I was overreacting. Maybe I was just being paranoid. "So, what exactly are you going to write about?" I asked, trying to buy myself some time, feeling the tension building up inside me. "Oh, just the usual," she said casually. "How the date went, what we talked about, and of course, your vibe. I'll give you a rating out of 10 too, if you want." She laughed. There was something in her voice that didn't sound as lighthearted as she was making it seem. I knew Alex was a little different the moment we met. We were introduced by mutual friends, and he seemed like a cool guy at first. He was confident, the kind of person who always seemed to have something interesting to say. And I found myself drawn to his energy. We started talking more and hanging out regularly, and I honestly thought we were starting to build a solid connection. But there was something odd about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It was like he was always on, always trying to present himself as someone who had it all together, a little too perfectly. It wasn't until our second date that things really took a strange turn. We met up at this small, cozy restaurant with dim lighting and a quiet vibe, just perfect for a chill evening out. I was feeling good about it, thinking this could be the start of something promising. Alex was his usual charming self, making me laugh with his quick wit and easygoing attitude. But then, out of nowhere, he started talking about my career. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mind talking about work, but it was the way he brought it out that had me raising an eyebrow. So, he said, casually leaning back in his chair, I was looking at your LinkedIn the other day. I blinked, caught off guard. Wait, what? He shrugged like it was no big deal. I mean, you got a pretty impressive resume, but I was thinking you could really rebrand yourself. Like, give it a fresh update, make it pop more. I didn't know how to respond. I mean, sure, LinkedIn is public, but why was he looking at it? And why was he critiquing my profile on a date? It felt invasive, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I just nodded and tried to move past it. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could tweak a few things, I said, still feeling a bit weird about the whole situation. Alex smiled, like he had just handed me the answer to some secret formula. You got the right skills, but I think you could really stand out if you reframe how you present yourself. Think of it like branding. You're selling yourself, you know. I wasn't sure if he was giving me career advice or trying to impress me with his self proclaimed expertise. It was starting to feel less like a date and more like a professional meeting. Over the course of the evening, he went on and on about my personal brand. He pointed out every little thing in my job history that he thought could be polished or refined. It wasn't that his advice was bad. I mean, who doesn't want to improve their professional image? But the way he said it, like I wasn't good enough just as I was, made me feel like I was some sort of project he could fix. The weird part, this wasn't even the first time he'd brought it up. A week earlier, when we were chatting about our goals and aspirations, he'd mentioned how much he admired people who were driven and self-made. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now hearing him talk about rebranding me like I was a company in need of a new marketing strategy, it felt off. By the time dessert came, I could barely focus on the conversation. My mind was spinning with everything he'd said. I wanted to tell him to back off, that I didn't need him to be my personal career coach, but I didn't want to be rude. I was still hoping this was just a weird blip and that things would go back to normal. But then, just when I thought the evening couldn't get any stranger, Alex leaned in, his voice lowering like he was about to share some earth-shattering wisdom. You know, he said, if you really want to make it, you've got to be strategic. Life is all about strategy. It's about knowing who you are, but also knowing how to sell that to the right people. It's all about the image you project. I didn't even know how to respond. Was he talking about dating, or was he still talking about my brand? He seemed so caught up in this idea of personal strategy that I started to wonder if he even saw me as an actual person or just a case study to be improved. I took a deep breath, trying to redirect the conversation. I get that you're into this whole self-improvement thing, but it's not really my style to be so calculated all the time. He didn't seem to hear me. Instead, he kept going on about how I could improve my online presence and how important it was to constantly evolve and stay ahead of the curve. It was exhausting just listening to him, and by the time the check came, I was ready to get out of there. As we walked out of the restaurant, I could feel the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. Alex seemed to think he was doing me a favor, helping me level up, but it didn't feel like help. It felt like pressure. It felt like he was trying to mold me into someone I wasn't. When we got to my car, I could see he was still buzzing with energy, like he had just delivered the best motivational speech of his life. I, on the other hand, was mentally drained. I forced a smile, trying to be polite. Thanks for the night, I said, but there was no enthusiasm behind my words. Alex leaned in, clearly expecting a kiss. I had a great time, he said, grinning. I stepped back a little bit too uncomfortable with the situation to let it slide. Yeah, I'm not sure this is going to work, I said, the words just slipping out. I think we're looking for different things. His grin faltered, but he quickly masked it with a smile. Oh, okay. Well, if you change your mind, just remember your personal brand is everything. I nodded awkwardly, got in my car, and drove away, feeling a mix of confusion and relief. The more I thought about the night, the more it hit me. Alex wasn't just trying to give me career advice, he was trying to reshape me. Everything about him seemed centered around self-promotion, self-image, and manipulation. It wasn't just about finding a connection with me. It was about branding me into something he could admire or use. And I wasn't interested in being anyone's project. As I drove home, I realized that I wasn't looking for someone who wanted to improve me. I wanted someone who liked me for who I was without the pressure to constantly be better or more polished. Dating shouldn't feel like a business strategy, and Alex, it was all business. It started with a compliment, a casual one, but enough to make me pause. Samantha was everything I liked in a person. She was smart, funny, easy to talk to, and we had a ton in common. We'd met through a mutual friend at a small get-together, and from the moment we started chatting, I felt like we clicked. She had a way of making everything feel comfortable, like we'd known each other forever, even though we'd only just met. The conversation flowed easily, and by the end of the night, I was looking forward to seeing her again. We started texting after that, exchanging funny stories, opinions, and random thoughts. Everything seemed perfect. After a few weeks of talking, she suggested we meet up for drinks. I thought, why not? I'd already felt like I was getting to know her through our messages, and I was excited to take things to the next level in person. We picked a low-key bar, the kind of place that wasn't too loud, but it still had a nice vibe to it. The moment I saw her, I recognized that same comfortable energy she had from our texts. She smiled as soon as she saw me, and we gave each other a quick hug before finding a quiet spot. As we sat down, she immediately went into one of those stories that had me laughing within minutes. I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly cool she was. At first, everything felt like a normal date. We talked about work, hobbies, and random stuff. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and I thought we were off to a great start. But then she said something that made me pause just for a second. You know, I've been thinking about how to help you succeed, she said, swirling her drink. I didn't know how to respond. Help me succeed? I asked, trying to catch the meaning behind her words. Yeah, she said, as if it was obvious. I've been working on a plan for you. I'm really good at this kind of thing, helping people get to where they need to be. I sat back a little, unsure where she was going with this. What do you mean, a plan? Samantha leaned forward, her eyes bright, like she was sharing some kind of secret. I'm talking about grooming me for success. I've done it before, and trust me, I'm really good at it. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone says they want to groom you for success, it doesn't exactly sound like something you hear on a casual date. I laughed, figuring she was just joking around, but she didn't seem like she was kidding. She seemed dead serious. I started to feel a little uneasy, like I was missing something. What exactly does that mean? I asked, still unsure if this was just a quirky way she was trying to get close to me. Well, she said, still grinning, you're going places, I can tell. But there are some things you need to work on. You're already pretty smart, but you could be doing more with your time. I've been studying your habits, your routines. There's a lot of potential there, and I want to help you unlock it. I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. At this point, I wasn't even sure if she was giving me career advice or if this was something deeper. It felt like she was more focused on shaping me into something, rather than just enjoying the moment with me. So, you're telling me you've been studying me? I asked, laughing awkwardly. That's a little intense, don't you think? She didn't seem to understand the awkwardness in my voice. I know it sounds a little extreme, but trust me. People need guidance. You need guidance. I can teach you how to get where you want to be. I had no idea how to respond. I'd gone on plenty of dates before, but I'd never had anyone suggest that they were going to groom me for success. I thought maybe I'd misheard her, but the more she talked, the more I realized she was dead serious. Samantha spent the next hour outlining her plan for me. She told me she'd noticed certain habits of mine, some good, some bad, and she had a whole set of recommendations for how I could improve. She talked about time management, optimizing my daily schedule, and even suggested that I quit my job and pursue something else. I started to feel more and more like I was trapped in a coaching session rather than a date. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a bit flattered that she thought I had potential. The weirdest part, she didn't seem to think any of this was strange. To her, it was just a normal thing to do. Everyone needs a little guidance, she said, as if it was totally normal to assess someone's life on a first date. I've been doing this for years. You wouldn't believe how many people I've helped. I tried to keep the conversation light after that, but it was hard. It felt like she wasn't really interested in me as a person, but as a project she could fix and mold. The more she talked, the more I realized she wasn't the person I thought she was. She didn't care about getting to know me on a personal level. She cared about turning me into someone she could shape into her version of success. I couldn't stop myself from wondering, was this just a way for her to feel powerful? Did she get some kind of satisfaction out of helping people, even when they didn't ask for it? She was so caught up in her own idea of what success looked like that she couldn't see how uncomfortable I was getting. After a while, I made up an excuse to leave. I told her I had to get up early the next day, and that I'd really enjoyed our time together but needed to head out. As I walked to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She had this image of herself as some kind of guru helping people reach their full potential. But I wasn't looking for a mentor. I was looking for someone I could connect with on a real, equal level. I didn't hear from her for a few days, but when I did, it was exactly what I expected. A text full of tips on how I could maximize my potential and a few links to self-help articles. I ignored it. I didn't need her guidance, and I certainly didn't want to be someone's project. I deleted the message and moved on, realizing that sometimes the people you meet aren't what they seem. And in this case, what I thought was a date turned into something entirely different. As strange as the experience was, I walked away with one solid takeaway. I didn't need to be groomed for success. I just needed to be myself. It was one of those nights where everything felt like it was falling into place. I'd met Zach a few weeks earlier, and after a few casual hangouts, I was starting to think he could be something more. He was charming, laid back, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything: work, life, travel, and he always seemed to have something new to say, something I could relate to. It was refreshing, honestly. I wasn't used to meeting someone who clicked so easily with me. We made plans to meet up at my place one evening after work. I wasn't expecting anything fancy, just a chill night, some drinks, and maybe a movie. He'd been hinting at how he was looking forward to relaxing for a change, which I thought was kind of sweet. He mentioned something about being in between jobs, which I didn't think much of at the time. People go through rough patches, right? It's normal. So when he showed up at my door, smiling with that easygoing attitude of his, I figured it was going to be another one of those fun, laid-back hangouts. But as he walked in, I noticed something weird. It wasn't anything huge, but it was a detail I couldn't ignore. He was carrying a duffel bag. It wasn't like a gym bag. It was huge, the kind of duffel you pack for a week-long trip. At first, I didn't think much of it, assuming he had plans to stay over. After all, we talked about him crashing at my place before, especially on weekends when we didn't want to deal with traffic or whatever. Hey, what's with the bag? I asked, raising an eyebrow as he set it down near the couch. Oh, nothing, he said, flashing me one of those disarming smiles. Just some stuff I've been needing to take care of. You know, laundry and all that. I nodded. Something about the whole situation felt off. The bag was a little too big for just laundry, and the way he said it so casually made me feel like he was hiding something. But I didn't press him. I figured it was probably nothing. We hung out for a while, talked about everything under the sun, and had a few drinks. But as the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Zach kept talking about how he was still figuring things out, how he was between gigs, and how much he was looking forward to getting back on his feet. It wasn't that I didn't sympathize. Everyone has tough patches. But it started to feel like he was avoiding the real reason he wasn't working. Every time the subject came up, he quickly changed the topic as if he wasn't ready to explain. Then the moment I should have noticed came. I was in the kitchen making some snacks when I heard him rummaging through his duffel bag. I thought nothing of it, assuming he was just grabbing a jacket or something, but when I turned around, I saw him pull out a stack of clothes and start folding them neatly. Are you folding your clothes? I asked, unsure if I was seeing things. He froze for a second before throwing me that smile again. Yeah, just needed to tidy up a bit. Can't leave my stuff lying around, right? I stared at him, trying to process what was happening. This wasn't the casual, laid-back vibe I was used to. This felt different. Zach, what's going on? Why are you folding your clothes in my living room? He set the clothes down and looked at me, his expression changing from his usual easygoing smile to something more serious. Look, I didn't want to bring this up tonight, but I guess there's no way around it now. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What do you mean? I'm kind of between places right now, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I've been crashing on a few friends' couches and bouncing around a bit. I didn't want to make you uncomfortable, so I didn't mention it before. My mind was racing. What? He'd been couch surfing. He'd been living off of other people's hospitality and hadn't mentioned it to me before. I was trying to make sense of it all, but it wasn't adding up. He'd always made it seem like he had things together, like he was just between jobs for a little while. But this felt like a lot more than just a temporary situation. I stared at him for a moment, trying to gauge if he was serious. Wait, so you've been staying at other people's places? You're not. No, no, he said quickly, his voice soft but desperate. It's not like that. I'm not just crashing with random people. I've been staying with friends mostly, but I didn't want you to think I was taking advantage of you or anything. I took a step back, trying to let the information sink in. He wasn't asking for money or anything, but this was still a huge deal. Why hadn't he told me earlier? Why hadn't he been upfront about it? The whole between jobs thing made sense now, but it also felt like he had been hiding a bigger truth. And if we were going to continue seeing each other, I needed to know the full picture. I mean, why didn't you just tell me? I asked, my voice more hurt than I intended. Why hide all this? Zach sighed and set the folded clothes back in his bag. I didn't want to scare you off. I know it sounds weird, but I didn't think you'd understand. I didn't want you to think I was a mess. The words stung more than I expected. I hadn't thought of him as a mess. I just thought he was going through a rough patch. But now, sitting there in my living room with him in his duffel bag, it felt like so much more than that. It felt like he was living in limbo, unable to commit to anything, bouncing from one place to the next without really taking responsibility for his life. I get it, but I started, my voice faltering. You can't keep hiding stuff like this, Zach. I'm not here to fix anyone, but I need honesty. If we're going to be more than just casual friends, we need to be able to talk about the real stuff. Zach looked down at the floor for a moment before meeting my gaze again. I know, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to be like this. I don't know what to do. It was then that I realized he didn't have a plan. He didn't know how to get out of this cycle, and he wasn't ready to face it. And I wasn't sure I was the person who could help him. I didn't need to be anyone's savior. I needed someone who could meet me halfway, with their own life in order, at least somewhat. I think we need to take a step back, I said quietly. I don't think I'm the right person to help you with this. You gotta figure it out on your own. I saw the disappointment in his eyes, but there was nothing I could do. I didn't want to be cruel, but I couldn't pretend like this was okay. I needed someone who was grounded, who had their life together, and Zach, well, he wasn't there yet. He nodded, a little defeated, and started packing up his things. As he left, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and relief. I wanted to be supportive, but I couldn't let myself get caught up in his problems. Some things were just too big to take on, and for once, I was okay with walking away. I'd never thought I'd be the type of person to get caught up in a weird dating game, but I guess there's a first time for everything. It all started when I met Nayli. She was one of those girls who could light up a room with a smile, and every conversation with her felt like you were the most important person in the world. We met at a friend's party, and from the moment we started talking, I felt an instant connection. She had that easygoing charm about her, and I was drawn to her right away. We went on a couple of dates after that. They were simple, nothing too over the top, just getting to know each other better. I liked her, and I thought she liked me. We had fun. Everything seemed pretty normal until one night when she dropped something that made me pause. We were sitting at a small cafe, enjoying a late night snack. She was laughing about something I'd said when she suddenly stopped mid-laugh, looked at me with this almost mischievous glint in her eye, and said, "You know, I'm really surprised you asked me out. I thought you'd be one of the guys who'd just let me go on to the next one." I didn't quite understand what she meant by that. I asked, "What do you mean? Why would I just let you go on to the next one?" She shrugged as if it were no big deal and said, "Oh, I just figured I'd be a part of some experiment or something. See how many dates I could stack up in one weekend. It's a bet with my friends." I stared at her, unsure if I heard her right. Wait, what? A bet? Nayli's eyes flickered nervously, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if she was serious or just joking. Yeah, well, I mean, it's not really a big deal. It's just for fun. My friends thought it would be hilarious to see how many guys I could date in one weekend, and I thought, why not? It's just a little game, right? I wasn't sure if I should laugh or if I should be concerned. On one hand, I thought she was joking, but on the other, the look on her face told me she was serious. I tried to brush it off at first, not wanting to overthink things, but the more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I felt. A bet? Were we all just pawns in some strange game she was playing with her friends? The next few days were a blur. Nayli texted me like nothing had changed, and I kept responding, not really knowing where I stood. We made plans to hang out again, but this time, something felt different. There was this weird pressure hanging in the air, like I was just another guy in the lineup for her weekend experiment. It was hard to shake the feeling that I wasn't as important to her as I thought. We met up again at a bar a few nights later. She was wearing this casual outfit, but she still looked amazing, effortlessly cool, with that same bright smile that made everything feel easy. I tried to keep the mood light, but I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. I decided to bring it up. So, about that bet, are you still doing it? I asked, half joking, trying to gauge her reaction. She laughed like it was no big deal. Oh, yeah. My friends are really invested in it. They have this whole point system. First date, second date, how many texts we exchange, that kind of thing. It's honestly kind of fun. I couldn't help but feel a little sick to my stomach. Fun? For who exactly? It felt like I was just another number in her game, another person on her checklist. It wasn't that I was some kind of prize to be won, but the whole thing felt weird. It felt like she was playing me, and maybe that was the part that bothered me the most. I wasn't some guy to be ranked in some competition. I was just looking for someone I could connect with, someone real. But she didn't see it that way. As the night wore on, she kept checking her phone, texting back and forth with her friends, who were apparently keeping track of her progress. At one point, she even showed me a group chat where they were ranking their dates on a scale of 1 to 10, with bonus points for things like how long the date lasted or how much they paid for drinks. I couldn't believe it. Was I really just part of some weird social experiment for her and her friends? After that night, I tried to talk to her again about what was going on. I asked her how she felt about the whole thing, if she thought it was fair to everyone involved. Her response was as casual as ever. It's just for fun, she said. It's not that deep. Honestly, I'm just seeing where things go. No harm in having a little fun, right? I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to walk away right then and there, but I didn't want to seem dramatic. I liked Naily, at least I liked the idea of her. But this wasn't what I signed up for. I wasn't interested in being just another guy in her lineup. I didn't want to be part of some game where I didn't even know the rules. The next time we hung out, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be another point on our scoreboard, and I wasn't going to waste my time in a game where I was just a piece to be moved around. I decided to pull back to see how she would react. I wasn't going to chase after her, trying to prove I was worth her time. If she really liked me, if there was any real connection there, then she'd notice that I wasn't going to play her game. To my surprise, she didn't seem to mind at first. She kept texting me, trying to set up more dates, but I was distant. I didn't respond right away, and when I did, my answers were short, polite, but distant. The more I pulled away, the more I realized she wasn't as invested as I was. She didn't seem to care that much about getting to know me. In the end, I was just another player in her game, and it didn't take long for her to stop trying. I'd never heard from her again after that. I'm not sure what I expected, but it was clear she wasn't looking for anything serious. She was just playing a game, and I wasn't interested in being part of it anymore. It wasn't a bad experience, necessarily. I learned something about myself. I wasn't willing to settle for someone who didn't see me as more than just a bet. In the end, I realized something. Dating should be about connection, not competition. And if you're just looking for a game, then you're probably not looking for something real. I'd never thought I'd end up in a situation like that. You know, the kind where everything seems perfect, but you have this nagging feeling in the back of your mind that something isn't quite right. It was one of those too good to be true moments. Jake seemed like the perfect guy, smart, funny, easy to talk to, and a real gentleman. We met through a mutual friend at a weekend barbecue, and it didn't take long for us to hit it off. We talked for hours, laughed about the dumbest things, and shared stories about our lives. It felt natural, effortless. By the end of the night, I was already looking forward to seeing him again. Our first few dates were great, just the usual getting to know each other stuff. We went to a couple of coffee shops, had dinner at nice places, and spent hours just walking around the city, talking about everything from our childhoods to our future dreams. We had this chemistry that was hard to ignore, and I couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, I had finally met someone who was on the same page as me. It was refreshing, exciting, and honestly, it had been a while since I'd felt this way about someone. But then things started to get a little weird. It wasn't anything huge at first, just small things that made me question what was really going on. For one, Jake was always a little too perfect. He would compliment me constantly, telling me how beautiful I looked, how smart I was, how much he admired my ambition. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate it, but after a while, it started to feel a little forced, almost like he was trying too hard to sell me on something. I chalked it up to him just being genuinely nice, maybe a little more eager than usual. Everyone has their quirks, right? But it wasn't just the compliments that started to raise red flags. It was the way he always seemed to be just a little too perfect. His life seemed to be completely in order. He had a great job, a nice apartment, a solid group of friends. Everything seemed like it was exactly where it should be. I didn't know why, but I felt this weird pressure to match his perfection. I started to second guess myself. Was I doing enough? Was I good enough? Then came the night I found out the truth. I had just gotten home from work, feeling a little tired, but still looking forward to spending time with Jake. We had made plans to meet at a bar downtown, and I was eager to see him. I had a feeling things were going well between us, and I wanted to keep that momentum going. As soon as I stepped inside the bar, I spotted him right away. He was sitting at a table by the window, smiling at his phone. I walked over to him, and when he looked up, his face lit up in that way that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. We exchanged pleasantries, and then he got up to hug me, just like he always did. But as soon as he pulled away, I noticed something odd. His phone was still in his hand, and the lock screen had changed. I could see a woman's face. Her smile was wide, and it looked like a picture of them together. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was just a friend or something. But when he noticed me looking at the phone, his face went pale. "Oh, that's just my fiancée," he said, quickly shoving the phone into his pocket. "I meant to tell you about her. I didn't want to bring it up too soon. My stomach dropped. "Wait, fiancé," I managed to say, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Jake sighed, looking uncomfortable. "Yeah. I know this probably seems messed up. I'm really sorry I didn't mention it earlier, but I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. I'm engaged, but things haven't been going well for a while now. I've been kind of distant from her, and I don't know how to explain it, but when we met, I felt like I finally found someone I could connect with. I just didn't want to mess things up before we got to know each other." I was speechless. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. This wasn't what I had signed up for. I had been so into Jake, thinking he was someone who was as real and genuine as I was. But now I was hearing that not only was he engaged, but he was also keeping it a secret from me. I had been just one more person in the mix, a casual fling in the middle of his complicated life. I stared at him, trying to process what was happening. "So, you've been seeing me while you're engaged, and you didn't think to mention that." He looked guilty, and I could tell he felt bad, but it didn't change the fact that this whole situation was messed up. "I know, and I feel terrible about it. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to get you involved in my mess. But now that you know, I don't know what to do." I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. I wanted to scream, to call him out on everything, but I didn't have the energy for it. I didn't want to be part of this. Any of this. The idea that I had been the other woman, even if I hadn't known about it, made my skin crawl. How could he think it was okay to hide such an important part of his life? How could I have been so blind? "I don't know what to say to you right now, Jake," I said quietly. "I think you need to figure out your life. I can't be involved in whatever this is." He opened his mouth like he was about to protest, but I held up my hand, cutting him off. "No, I'm not going to be your second choice, and I'm not going to sit here while you figure things out with her. You need to go back to her, and you need to be honest with both of us." He didn't argue. He just stood there, looking like a deer caught in headlights, unsure of what to do. And honestly, I didn't care. I was done. The disappointment I felt wasn't even about the engagement itself. It was the fact that he hadn't been honest with me from the beginning. That's what hurt the most. I walked out of the bar without looking back, and that was the last time I ever saw Jake. He tried to reach out a few times after that, but I ignored his messages. It wasn't even about being mad at him anymore. It was about knowing I deserved better than someone who couldn't be honest. If you're hiding something that big, what else are you hiding? I learned my lesson that night. Trust your instincts and don't settle for someone who can't be upfront with you. If they can't give you that, then they're not worth your time. And that was one lesson I wasn't going to forget anytime soon. I never really understood the whole labels thing. When people start talking about what you are to them, boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever. To me, it always seemed like something that could either be figured out over time or just wasn't necessary if everything was going well. I mean, it's the 21st century, right? Who really cares about titles when you can just vibe with someone and see where it goes? At least, that's what I thought until I met Courtney. I met her at a friend's birthday party, and from the moment I saw her, I was intrigued. She wasn't the typical type of girl I'd usually go for. She was a little different. She had this cool, laid back vibe to her, but at the same time, she was also kind of mysterious. It wasn't that she was playing hard to get, but she definitely wasn't throwing herself into conversation like everyone else at the party. That caught my attention. We started talking, and the conversation just flowed effortlessly. We talked about music, random hobbies, and even some weird life stories we both experienced. By the end of the night, I was kind of hooked. She didn't do the whole flirt like crazy thing, but she was interesting, and that intrigued me. I figured I'd ask her out, but not in a cheesy way. Just a simple, hey, want to grab a coffee sometime? To my surprise, she said yes. And just like that, we went on a date. A few days later, we went for dinner. Then another night, we went to a concert together. It felt natural, easy, like we were just two people getting to know each other without the pressures of expectations. But then things started to shift in a way I wasn't ready for. It all began when she casually mentioned that she didn't believe in labels. We were sitting at a quiet bar, talking about how everything felt so comfortable between us, and she dropped out of nowhere. Yeah, I'm just not really into the whole labeling thing, she said, sipping her drink. I think the whole boyfriend slash girlfriend thing can be kind of limiting. I mean, why put pressure on something that feels good? At first, I didn't think much of it. I just nodded, thinking she meant we didn't need to rush into anything. Maybe she just wanted to take things slow. Who wouldn't? But then, as time went on, I started to realize she meant a lot more than that. We kept seeing each other, and the more we hung out, the more I realized something was off. We were spending a lot of time together, doing all the typical couple things, eating out, going to the movies, hanging with friends, but there was always this weird vibe that I couldn't quite shake. It was like I was in this weird gray area. I wasn't sure if I was just a friend, a fling, or something more. Every time I tried to ask her about it, she'd give me the same answer. I'm just not into labels, okay. And yet, the longer we spent time together, the more I started to feel like I was in a relationship, but with none of the benefits of actually being in one. We go on dates, kiss each other goodbye, and talk every day. But when I asked her what we were, where we stood, she'd just smile and shrug, acting like it wasn't a big deal. It started to bug me more than I cared to admit, but I didn't want to seem like I was pushing her into something she didn't want. Things took an even stranger turn when she showed me something that really threw me off. One afternoon, we were hanging out at her apartment, and she casually opened her laptop, showing me a spreadsheet. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was always working on random projects, so I assumed it was just another one of those things. But when she clicked to open the file, I saw what it was, a ranking spreadsheet of everyone she was dating. My jaw almost hit the floor. At first, I thought I was imagining things. I figured it had to be some kind of joke. But no, she was serious. There on her screen was a detailed list of names, guys she was dating or at least going on dates with, and their ranking. There were columns with ratings like how fun was the date and how much effort did they put in. And the worst part, she was asking me for my opinion on where I thought I ranked. I couldn't help but laugh a little, thinking it was some weird joke. But when I looked at her face, I realized she wasn't kidding. She wanted to know where I thought I ranked in comparison to the other guys she was seeing. I think you're probably a solid 8, she said, looking over at me for my reaction. What do you think? I didn't know how to respond. It felt like I had just stepped into some kind of dating game that I hadn't agreed to play. Wait, what? I said, almost laughing out of disbelief. You're ranking your dates like this is a competition. She nodded, looking at me as if this was the most normal thing in the world. Yeah, why not? It's just fun. My friends and I have this little bet going on. We all rank the guys we date and see who comes out on top at the end of the month. I don't even remember what I said after that. My mind was racing. How had I gotten myself into this situation? Was I just one of many in her list of dates, only to be ranked and scored for her amusement? The more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I got. I wasn't just some guy she was casually seeing. I was part of her experiment, part of a weird competition she had going with her friends. The whole thing felt wrong. I had been treating it like something real, something worth pursuing, and here she was treating it like it was a game to pass the time. I wasn't some number, some rank on a list. I didn't want to be in this kind of competition. I didn't know what to do in that moment. I wanted to call her out to ask how she could think this was okay. But instead, I just excused myself and left. I couldn't look at her the same way again. The whole idea of dating her was suddenly exhausting. I wasn't interested in being part of her game anymore. I stopped talking to her after that day. I didn't care if she thought I was overreacting. I wasn't willing to play second fiddle to some ranking system she had going with her friends. Dating should be about connection, not a scorecard. It didn't matter if we were in the same league or not. I wasn't interested in being anyone's number 8. I met him on Tinder like most disasters begin these days. His name was Jamie. His profile was kind of basic but not in a red flag way. Just enough info to keep you curious. He had one photo with a dog, one at the beach, one selfie in a mirror that wasn't totally unhinged. Bio said something short like laid back, into road trips and film photography, which somehow made him seem low maintenance and interesting at the same time. I swiped right because, honestly, I'd had a string of dates with guys who either overshared within the first 5 minutes or looked nothing like their pictures, so someone normal was appealing. We matched pretty quick. He messaged first, said something casual but not boring. We talked for a couple of days. Nothing super deep, just joking around, music stuff, small talk. He was funny, chill, and had that kind of confidence that didn't feel forced. After like 3 days of texting, he asked if I wanted to hang out. His exact words were, "I'm house sitting for a friend right now, super quiet spot, decent view, bring snacks." Which, okay, yeah, a little weird. But it didn't set off alarms at first. I've done weirder first dates than hanging out at someone's temporary place. So I said yes. He sent me the address. It was in this older part of town, not sketchy exactly, just forgotten. Faded lawns, cracked driveways, those one-story homes that all looked the same. When I pulled up, the house looked normal enough. Beige, boxy, a little rundown, like the siding hadn't been cleaned since 2009. But there was a porch light on, and Jamie opened the door before I even knocked, like he'd been waiting for me. He gave me a hug, and I stepped inside. The house was weirdly empty. Like, the kind of empty where you wonder if someone actually lives there or if it's just being used to store dust. There was a fold-up camping chair in the living room. One. A small flat-screen TV sitting on a milk crate. No rug, no pictures, no clutter. Just beige walls and creaky wood floors that echoed every step. He must have seen my face because he immediately said, "Yeah, my friend just moved in. Hasn't really furnished yet. He travels a lot, minimalist vibe." I nodded like that made sense, but already my gut was like, nope. Minimalist didn't explain why there were cobwebs in the corners and a faint smell like stale wood and mold. I followed him into the kitchen, which had one spoon, one bowl, and a pack of instant noodles on the counter. He handed me a beer and started talking about movies. I tried to stay engaged, but my brain was laser focused on the strangeness of the whole setup. There were no keys on the table, no signs of anyone actually living there, not even junk mail. After about 20 minutes of small talk, I asked, "So, how long are you house sitting?" He looked at me, took a sip of his drink, and said, "Just this week. My buddy's in Costa Rica." I asked what his friend did for work. He blinked. Software stuff." It was the way he said it, like he was guessing. That's when I knew something wasn't right. You don't forget what your friend does for work. You especially don't forget if it's the friend whose house you're supposedly living in. I excused myself to use the bathroom. Walked down the hall and opened a door. Empty room. Heartwood floor, one lone sock in the corner, and a busted blind hanging half off the window. Next room. Same. Empty. Not bare because they just moved in, but empty like no one had touched it in years. The bathroom had a bar of soap and a used towel. That's it. Not even toothpaste. When I came back out, Jamie was scrolling on his phone like nothing was weird. I sat back down, then decided to just ask. "Hey, so this place, do you actually know the person who owns it?" He paused. You know when someone pauses just a second too long. He looked up from his phone, kind of laughed, and said, "Why? You think I broke in or something?" He meant it as a joke, I think, but my brain was already on fire. I laughed weakly and said, "Honestly, I don't know. Something just feels off." He shrugged and said, "Not as cool. Don't worry about it." But I was already worried. I started putting things together. The empty rooms, the lack of furniture, no signs of anyone's life anywhere. The house didn't look lived in. It looked like it had been abandoned or maybe up for rent. Something felt fake, like he'd wandered into it and decided to pretend it was his for a weekend. I stood up, said I needed to get going. He didn't fight me on it, just said, "Cool," and walked me to the door. When I got in my car, I pulled up Zillow just out of curiosity, punched in the address, and there it was, recently vacant, available for rent, listed only 2 weeks ago. Photos matched exactly, down to the porch and a milk crate in the living room. Jamie hadn't been house sitting. Jamie didn't know the owner. Jamie had straight up broken into an empty house and invited me over like it was some Airbnb. I didn't text him again. He sent me a "had fun tonight" message a few hours later, and I didn't respond. Then he unmatched me. The weirdest part is I wasn't even mad. I was just confused. What was the plan there? Was he squatting? Was it some twisted flex? I still think about it sometimes, like maybe I walked into the middle of some strange scam or unhinged lifestyle choice. Either way, it's a hard no from me on the house-sitting date plan. Next time someone asks me to hang out at a place that doesn't belong to them, I'm Googling the lease first.